You want to listen to a podcast?
By who?
Georgia GOP Congressman Doug Collins.
How is it?
The greatest thing I have ever heard in my whole life.
I could not believe my ears.
In this house, wherever the rules are disregarded, chaos and mob rule. It has been said today, where is bravery? I'll tell you where bravery is found and courage is found. It's found in this minority who has lived through the last year of nothing but rules being broken, people being put down, questions not being answered. And this majority say, be damned with anything else. We're going to impeach and do whatever we want to do. Why? Because we won an election. I guarantee you, one day you'll be back in the minority and it ain't gonna be that fun.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the podcast. Glad you're doing your midweek break with us. Glad to have you either riding along with us, traveling along with us, wherever you listen to your podcast. Glad to have you being a part. Remember to tell people about the podcast, share it, share links, or subscribe wherever you get your podcast, no matter what platform it may be. Just subscribe. That way you make sure you'll get it every time it comes out on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. But we're glad to have you being a part of it. Today's an interesting show. And probably getting James's James normally shows up on Fridays in our Friday's Finest, but today I want to get a little bit of input in from James. We're going to talk about a conversation that I had with a dear friend of mine, and I'll leave him anonymous as name-wise, but he and I talk a lot about politics, a lot about things in the world and the different things that are going on, especially with government and law and everything else. But it was an interesting comment about not voting in partisan primaries. And I thought it was very interesting because this is someone who you want voting. This is someone who you want to be a part of the system. You want to have, evaluating candidates. As someone who's been on the ballot before, you want people who actually think deeper about subjects than simply talking points given to them. So today on the show, I'm going to talk about, have we ruined politics and the consequences of that moving forward. So right after the break, we'll come back. We'll be ready to go with today's episode on the Doug Collins Podcast.
We are experiencing instability at every level. Our government lacks leadership, and Bidenomics has been a disaster. The economy is in a fragile state. Inflation has been a consistent issue. High interest rates have put significant pressure on the real estate market, and there have been major bank failures. And many analysts say a stock market correction is likely overdue. We have global conflicts in Europe and the Middle East that have potential to spread, but gold has soared to record highs even among the tensions. There are so many reasons that Americans should consider investments in gold and silver, and Legacy Precious Metals is the gold standard. I love Legacy Precious Metals because of their zero-hassle, education-first approach. They can help you roll your traditional IRA into a gold IRA or ship metals directly to your house. That's what I do. So go to www.legacypminvestments.com to download their free gold investment guide. And look, I've read it. You need to read it. There's so much valuable information in there. So, friends, now's the time to not roll the dice with your hard-earned money. Find out about the growth potential that gold and precious metals can offer you. Contact Legacy Precious Metals today and tell them that Doug Collins sent you. You might have heard Mike Lindell and MyPillow no longer have the support of the box stores or the shopping channels as the way they used to. They've been part of the cancel culture, so they want to pass the savings directly on to you by having a $25 extravaganza. When Mike started MyPillow, it was just one product company. With the help of his dedicated employees, they now have hundreds of products. Some of you may not even know about that. So to get the word out, I want to invite my listeners to check out the $25 extravaganza. 2-pack multi-pillow use MyPillows are just $25. MyPillow sandals, $25. Their 6-pack of towel sets, $25. Brand new 4-pack dish towels. You guessed it, just $25. And for the first time ever, the MyPillows with all new Giza fabric, just $25. All orders over $75 will see free shipping too. This amazing offer won't last long, so go to mypillow.com and use the promo code Collins, that's COLLINS, or call 800-986-3994 today. That's promo code Collins.
All right, we're back, and let me elaborate a little further on this conversation. This conversation came up with, like I said, a good friend of mine who, in the course of a conversation dealing with some world events and dealing with some other issues, made the comment that that's why I didn't vote in any partisan primaries. In Georgia right now, we're in the middle of our early voting period coming up at the end of May for our primary season. And it sort of took me aback for a second, and I asked this person, I said, well, that mean you only voted in the judges' races? Because see, here in Georgia, judges' races are the only for the most part, nonpartisan races that you would have on the ballot at this time. And they're elected in May, and which is a little bit different. But again, that's a whole different topic for a different podcast. And he said, yes. And I said, and I thought about that for a second, and it came back that basically he was saying that he chose not to participate in the partisan politics of May, where both Republicans and Democrats, have their primaries. Now, in a county like mine, where I live, is Hall County, Georgia, and Hall County is predominantly Republican. So there are some Democrats on some of the races that are coming along, but not very many, and they're not really challenged. They're not going to, pull any major upsets here. It is interesting. We have in our city of Gainesville two people who, one is a known Democrat, but they have changed, I think, to where they don't have party recognition on these municipal elections in Gainesville, city of Gainesville. And you have a known Democrat and then someone who has really no political background. So it's going to be interesting to see how that happens in our major town in our county. But back to what he said, and it got me, and because this is someone, as I said in the intro, you want voting. This is somebody who I've talked to and known for going on probably more years than he or I would want 30 decades here of knowing that you want involved in the process. And it reminded me of some conversations that James and I have had before about parties, politics, and the interesting part is James, is our great producer here. He's also one of the co-hosts of Friday's Finest with us a lot of times with Chip, and we talk about a lot of things. But he's involved in hearing what goes on podcasts, radio shows. I mean, he's been involved in a lot of other places, but also is younger than me and younger than Chip and others when we talk about this. So it's been interesting to have this conversation. But I bring the question of, have we ruined politics? Because if we've lost a voter like my friend for the reasons of they're tired of members of Congress who just send letters to agencies but never do anything, or are just constantly saying we're going to take out a speaker, or Democrats who say that, we're not going to vote for anything that's less, far left or changing the way our system works. And all the way down to the media and how the media portrays and to the voters themselves, because of who we vote for or not vote for. And like I expressed to my friend, it was interesting to me that he's taking out himself of what I'll call an informed voter that, at worst case scenario could zero out an uninformed voter. And so anyway, a thought that came to my mind, and I wanted to lay that sort of groundwork today to get a picture, because I've talked about this a little bit in the past, and hear me, that politicians who simply do things for media strikes. I've said this before. If you don't have the votes in Congress and you continually, are basically taking the system and using it for your own political communication advantage, you're not being a politician. You're basically being a media darling, if you would, and you're getting YouTube hits or Twitter likes, and that's good in its place, but it's not governing. It's also what I was very frustrated with as a member of Congress, is when we would have hearings but no action attached to them. And I've been parts of dozens and dozens of hearings in which it was the latest thing that came across the news. We're going to have a hearing, everybody will talk about it, and nothing gets done. And Congress has very much of a power of the purse. It has the power of investigation. It has the power of legislation. It has so many things that it could do. And I think more and more people, including folks like myself who have not abandoned the system but are very frustrated with the system, have to deal with. So in light of that, the first stop I want to take, and James would love to get your thoughts on this as well as we're having a conversation today, is I believe part of this goes back to the change in media. And media format and media, and this is going to be an interesting discussion, I think, for the two of us, because I grew up in a time, good, bad, or indifferent, media and news. Let's rephrase this. News was news. They reported what they wanted to report, and invariably was, a lot of times much more liberal than even the Times in the 60s, 70s, 80s. I mean, you see all this going on. But your local newspapers, your others were not dependent on making money. TV, the news parts of the program, people advertised on, and they were not money losers. Nowadays, it's more of an entertainment factor. And so the media, by default or by choice, have divided themselves into what I'll call community groups. You have the liberal community groups, you have the conservative community groups, you have the maybe even the conspiratorial community groups, you have the elitist community groups, you have the other disinfected community groups, all playing the news of the day in a way that they now can monetize. And I'm beginning more and more to believe that, along with social media and other things, the first place we have to start is in, have we ruined politics? Have we changed the game of politics? So, James, if you're there with me, I have a question for you.
Talk to me.
All right, here's my question. I am still an old school guy. I would love to read a paper. Okay, you get me. I can remember I hate to say this, as short as 10, 15 years ago, I could buy a paper, and I may not agree with everything in the paper, but I had something in my hand. I read it. I could find stories. I know now that is old. Okay, my kids would tell me that. But now your generation getting information, how do you see that or maybe the better way is, how do you see not just yourself but others in your generation getting the information that I would have gotten from, say, the newspaper or I had a little bit of 24-hour news, but the old network news. Yeah. Is it different now for you?
Well, this one's tough. All right, so I'm just for everyone, I'm 31. All right, I was born in 1993. So I grew up, once I was in 8th grade, we had to start taking classes using the computer. Even 7th grade, maybe earlier. Everything's been digital, super fast. Most of my life, I grew up using a computer. I didn't, like a generation before us learned to grow up typing, and now we grew up with a computer, and God knows what they're learning now. But the point I'm making is I remember going to college in Philadelphia, and there was a paper in the morning that people would grab occasionally. But for the most part, you got your news from Facebook somehow. Okay. And then Instagram and Twitter. I remember when I found out about Twitter, I was at my grandparents' house, and my cousin said, "Oh, I hear her upstairs on her phone on the porch," because we were all up by the pool. And I hear her go, "Oh, James, we got to go to a concert." And I was like, "Oh, how do you know about the concert?" And she goes, "They just posted." And I was like, "On what?" And she was like, "Twitter." And I was like, "Oh." She's like, "Yeah, they have a concert tomorrow. We got to go." And I said, "I guess so. All right, I guess we're going to a concert tomorrow." And we found out that moment, and we went, right? Yeah. They're like, this is how you find things out is they post it, and then it became something where everyone started doing that, where they're posting secret concerts as long as you follow them, right? Stuff like that.
Right.
All of my news since I've been in college has essentially been on Instagram and Twitter. Let's be honest about it. If I watched the news on TV, I used to get sad because it was stuff that was forced to me, right? Like, I live in New York. I live in New Jersey and New York. So a lot of the stuff was, there's a 12-alarm fire in Brooklyn and blah, blah, blah. And you would just see all the sad stuff. And I'd be like, I don't want to watch this right now. I'm going to go in the other room. I'm going to go on my phone. Yeah.
Hey, James, can I stop you there for a second? Because you've just hit something. It has sort of begun. I don't, and I like what you said. I don't want to watch the media because I don't like to see, the sad stuff or bad stuff. Have we become curators of media? Oh, yeah. Where, it used to be, what was the old thing from the old 80s song? Fiddle, Don Henley or whatever. It was, but he talking about, if it bleeds, it leads. Okay. And nowadays, is there a generation that's just sort of moving away from that because they see it every day in life, or they just don't want to talk about it?
First of all, first of all, it's about media. We're oversaturated, right? It's okay. You have Instagram and Twitter. I don't know how often you use it, but I use mine way too much. I see let's say I'm watching football on Sunday, and I see an incredible play by Patrick Mahomes. I'm going to see that play about 50 more times on my phone from different accounts, right?
Yep.
But luckily, sports is the one thing you can't contort unless you want to make a terrible opinion about it. As far as politics are concerned and consuming your media, and this is, again, I made it pretty clear on this show many times, I have issue with both parties beyond belief.
Yeah.
I feel like everyone takes whatever the topic is and they force it down your throat their way. Now, if you follow a certain one, you're going to get that information that way. And that's how you're going to talk about it to other people. And that's how I think the media is. And I think on this show, we've done a pretty good job of trying to just say the facts about things, which is important to me. And I know probably more important to you. I get scared because I remember I was in high school when Obama was elected. I guess that's 2008, right? So I was going in high school. And I remember my parents were this is something that was important to my mom, is that she would never tell us who she's voting for. She never wanted her opinion to affect my opinion, ever. Right. Which I thought was super important. But so when Obama was I wanted to vote for him because I was like, this has changed, this is important, this is great. But that's all I got was just little bit of news because it was right before Instagram and Twitter and the boom, right? So I just got what TV had, and pretty much every channel had the same thing. This guy's for change, this guy might not be. Now, I don't remember what channels I was watching. I could have been totally biased. I don't know. My point is that I remember as a kid being like, I want to vote for him. I couldn't at the time, but I wanted to. And then when 2012 came around, I wanted to. And I did. After that, though, all I can remember, especially since I've been in this business, is it's just one group trying to destroy the other group. And I'm sure it's always been that way, but it's been way further away from us because we don't have social media 24/7 in our pocket staring at us. So you're just constantly getting crazy information. I mean, let's be honest. I don't think anyone liked Hillary Clinton, but before the email stuff and all the horrible things about her, people just didn't know. And it was fine. It was fine. People just didn't know. You just voted for whatever. Right. You voted. I don't know how to describe it any other way than you literally got a book. You got a book cover, and then when you voted for them, you opened the book. Now the book is wide open, and there's nothing you can do to stop any information about you coming out or any information about whatever topic you want to read about. You can just Google it, and it'll have the answer you're looking for, and that's terrifying.
It still amazes me, though, in the days of what you just talked about in the curated news, what I call it. And I think, it's an inbred cycle. It's the media and the politicians going the same way. And what you're seeing is the political group, and I've been a part of it, and others have realized that in a society in which things are harder to get done, you're not rewarded many times for what you get done. You're rewarded for only what is considered by your voting class, or however you're looking at it, to be effective, even if it's not effective. That's what kills me the most, James, as someone who's in this game the most, is how there are certain members of legislative bodies, either in the Congress, Senate, the U.S. House, U.S. Senate, or even in local and state bodies, that are lionized for saying stuff but not doing anything. That's the part that just amazes me till to this day. And I served with many of them, consider many of them friends, not in the sense that, I don't like them, but it's like you bring stuff up and don't do it. As I mentioned a few minutes ago in the show today, is having hearings but doing nothing about it, sending letters but not following through, using the letters to then raise money. They then get on certain media outlets to then make the story. And so I bring this around to an interesting conclusion here, that now voters have been lied to in their mind by
everyone,
both parties, enough to where they're checking out. And so you have friends like mine who are informed voters, people who actually look, read, do more research than the average person, who are just simply moving out of the election process. And I told this friend today, I said, so you're not going to vote in the local races, which, if you've ever listened to the Doug Collins podcast show for any minute at a time, you will know that the local school boards, local city councils, local county commissions, sheriff's races, DA's races are the most effective, are the most impactful on your life than anything we talk about on the national level for the most part. And his answer was yes. And it was like, wow. I mean, it hit me in a just different vein today after we've been talking about thinking. And, if you go back in the last couple of weeks on this podcast, I want you to go back and look at herd mentality. I've talked about it here on this show. I broke down the political aspects of these campus riots. I've talked about, thinking for a change. How do you actually get into that? And this is what we need to do. I spoke to a group, James, the other day of leaders in Georgia. And one of the things that I talked to them about was this idea of we've got to get past our reconciled notions of what we believe the society is and see who we are as a society, and are we moving forward? And I think that's going to be hard. So do you see this as voters? Yeah, and I think this is what drives the pollsters crazy. Are voters just becoming either one, more polarized, where they don't care anymore? I'm a conservative, I'll just vote R, or I'm a Democrat, I'll just vote D. Because here's the interesting, because I want to say, are they just pulling out? But yet you see, indications through polls and through actual results of actually voter increase. What do you see as the difference here?
It's both, right? Because you remember during the 2020, or I think it was 2020, right? Because Donald Trump had been voted in and everyone panicked.
Yeah.
So 2020 happens, and I can't remember a time in my life where more people were asking me to vote on the internet. Right? Do you remember that? It was disgusting.
Yeah.
It was, and people were doing way too much. It got weird at some point. Too many celebrities got involved. Either I'm going to vote or I'm not going to vote. I promise you, you're going on the internet wearing a shirt that says vote is not going to get me to do it.
Yeah, it is not happening. Thanks for playing.
You brought something up where you said, are people just going to vote right or left? And I think that is the scary part. My mom, that's okay. I brought my mom up twice now, but she said that's what scares her most is that she registered. I think she registered when she was young as a Republican, only because her mother was at the time. But she said the important thing about this is you should be able to vote for either party, right? As long as your views align with what that person is saying.
Yeah.
Right? People are just voting right and left now. It doesn't matter who's in there. I mean, let's be honest. And we can argue about this. These men are 1,000 years old. They shouldn't be doing this. We are voting for 2,000-year-old men. And that seems crazy to me. It does. I'm not saying but it's clear, at least one of them, their capacity to understand what's going on sometimes is clear. It's on stage for us to see that it's not great.
Right.
So I think people are just voting right and left. I think that's scary to me. But also, people are checked out. They're just checked out. There's no if you try to avoid it, you can't. Every day is something new about this person doing this, and I'm in it, so it's worse for me. I live this life. I am constantly producing shows that have new information, stuff like this. But you talked about earlier, your own party is trying to destroy Mike Johnson because of decisions he had to make. And if you've even brought it now, listen, I'm not saying all his decisions are good or all his decisions are bad, but they're decisions he had to make. And he's done a pretty if you're on the right, he's done a pretty decent job condemning what's going on in the schools. I mean, you can't do anything about it. You could talk about it all you want, but we can't just go bum rush with the army in there and knock some students off their ass. I mean, we might, but I'm just saying, like that's its own party. I don't see that much from Democrats because they are a united front. Whatever their decision is, they do it together. And I have another thing you've made pretty clear on this show, but I think there's fatigue of just like, I don't want to do this again. I don't want to be told. I also don't want to be told to do it again. but I'm just going to do right or left and move on with my day. I personally, that's what I think's happening.
Well, I think, and it's just, I think, worth having a further conversation on it. And I wanted to have it today because it's fresh on my mind. And I was talking about this, like I said, with a friend. And you and I have sort of engaged in this offline, off camera, and we discussed. We've also talked about it. And I always wanted this show to be something. And if you go back to the very first episode, I think that we ever did together, James, God, it's almost been 3 years ago.
Almost.
We got a few more months. We're 3 years. And if you remember, what I said, I want you to think. I want you to talk about issues, to think about things, to listen to arguments. We've had Democrats on here. We've had Republicans on here. We've had no parties on here. We've had some interesting interviews on here.
Oh, yeah.
And then it's been really different. But my hope and my engagement is to engage in what I believe is the greatest system that we can have if people participate. If you don't participate in it, then the system can't work. Inherently, as I've said many times before, and I'm sort of tired of this on both sides of the aisle, this argument, we the people, if you don't do what we want, we the people will rise up. Well, bullcrap. We the people is all the people, not just the people who agree with you, okay? And I'm sort of sick of this idea, we the people will stand, oh, bullcrap. The same thing can be said by either party. Here's my idea. Why don't you convince the people that this was a good idea? The founding fathers used we the people as a coherent message of we want freedom, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Now, it's not necessarily that everybody agreed with that. I mean, the biggest compromises you would ever find came in the constitutional conventions. I mean, and yet now we've got into a situation in which the media has had to sell its soul in many ways to make a living. When you see newsrooms being gutted of journalists, and some of you out there, and especially I know on my left and my right, especially my right, you're saying, Douglas, they're terrible. They shouldn't be writing anyway. Well, okay, again, the marketplace is where you saw this. Where are we've gotten different, perspectives. And I think some of that is what's killed, quote, the mainstream media. But it's also the fact that, and we've not dealt with this. We've dealt with it some on this show, but not a lot. My biggest concern is not the big media companies or the New York Times or the New York Post or the Los Angeles Times, the Washington Post, or anything. I'm not concerned about those. I'm concerned about the smaller local papers that no longer are there because of social media, because of advertising, because of whatever you want to call it, that are no longer covering the county commission meetings, that are no longer covering the city council meetings, that are no longer covering the school board meetings, that are no longer covering the crime beat in the city. Why? Because they don't have reporters. And to me, that is I'll argue the bigger picture all day long. This is the part that concerns me, is when and how do we get back into accountability at government at the level that affects you the most?
Right. You're talking about you're talking about local, but like you can think about it this way, Doug. Imagine for a second you have a local paper. Let's just call mine would be I lived in Bergen County, so let's call it the Bergen News, right?
Yeah.
They can't exist because nobody's using that. Nobody's taking that paper. So where do they move? They move to Instagram and they move to Twitter and they move to a website, right? Nobody's going on the website, let's be honest, okay? But they're going to Instagram and they're probably going to their Twitter, right? And they'll post, hey, local officials today, they're meeting for this in your county or this in your town, right? And then everyone in the comment section is going to, let's say it's, I don't know, what's a weird example, something about a local library. There'll be 150 opinions under that page talking about, well, that's stupid. You shouldn't allow that in the library. Yeah, that's important for our library. There's people fighting about it. But they're all going to fight on Instagram, and they're not going to do anything about it at all. But if you have a paper, you can't argue to anybody. So you have to go somewhere to argue about it. I know that sounds weird, and I know that's like a real stretch, but I'm just saying it's way easier to argue in the comment section in your mom's basement than it is to go in public and vote for something.
Yeah, I can remember growing up, I always wanted to get – Gainesville Times is our local paper. And now we have Access North Georgia, which is a online version of our local radio station and, radio media issue, which they attempt to do some of this. I'm not trying to say they're completely out. But, they're not what they used to be. And I remember, you didn't want your name in the local paper. in the local paper actually investigates it. I remember most of my way through Congress, by the end, I didn't care what my local paper said because they wasn't covering it. I mean, I was actually told by a reporter, my comms director was told by a reporter, we told them about an event that I was having on a Saturday. It was a town, I don't know if it's town hall, but it was a meeting with a group of citizens. And they said, well, we'll try to come, but but this was the honest answer. I'm on an hourly and they won't pay me overtime. I mean, I can't make this crap up. So before we let go of this, there's one I want to end with something else. But before, James, thanks for participating today. And you'll love this. On this show, we love Twitter posts by a guy named 3-Year Letterman. He is hilarious in most of it. And by the way, for those of you out there who keep running right into the buzzsaw of 3-Year Letterman because you think he's actually posting real stuff, you need a life. But anyway, to go into what we just said today, James, listen to this post. This is today. I'm taping this on Tuesday. This will come out tomorrow. But this was today. 3-Year Letterman said, I am Coach Letterman. I'm 45 on July 4th. I'm a youth football coaching legend and a licensed notary public. I live in Georgia and will not be voting in November. How about you?
Perfect.
Wow. I mean, and again, this is coming, from what is inherently a parody account. Don't get me wrong. And like I said, we go back. I follow him. He's funny. He's hilarious, and so many of his things. But there is sort of what I'm talking about right there.
Yeah, listen. I don't blame anybody for not wanting to vote. I blame people.
I do.
You should.
I do.
See, Doug, we should have this conversation another time too. But I get I'm just sick of this. I understand it, but I still think you need to regardless. I'm not saying you shouldn't. I'm just saying I understand the being exhausted by politics.
I get it. Yeah, I do too. Look, I've been telling, and anybody who listens to this show, and by the way, if you want me in a speaking engagement anywhere, I mean, just all you got to do is go to the email button on the DougCollinsPodcast.com, and you hit the email button and send me, and we'll talk about coming, because I speak all over the country. But I'm very honest, especially with the Republicans and that I go speak to, is that you've got to get out and vote. You've got to be a part of the process, and disconnecting from the process is letting the other side win. And I think that's if you got to have an opinion, you need to be out there placing it in. I think 3-Year Letterman, but I agree with you. These are conversations we may, and this may be something we can get some other people on, just to have a roundtable conversation, more like the focus groups, and say, hey, is there a way to get this back? I think we know the problem. We talk about the problem, but the question is there any political will to change it? And I'll be frank with you, I don't think there is. And speaking of which, here's my parting shot for the day. Speaking of no political will, Donald Trump has been charged in Georgia on a RICO violation, which is typically reserved for mobsters and others to get them on various things, which I thought was very interesting by Fonnie Willis down here. And what the basic underlying case of RICO is that you have a criminal act that is being perpetrated with the different aspects of others who help perpetrate the case. I mean, that's a very elementary definition of how to look at it. But it brought up to me that, and we've talked about all these campus rights and everything else, for all of these DAs like Alvin Bragg and Fonnie Willis and others who have found cases against Donald Trump that basically are falling apart in their own lap because they're making up the cases, why aren't they going after, if justice was truly blind, my parting shot for the day is, why are they not going after the agitators in these college campuses? That is the classic definition of RICO. It's the classic definition of adding in others to fulfill a criminal act. But yet, there's not the political will to do that. That would actually mean taking a stand and applying the law evenly. Not seeing that in many of our big cities, and especially as it deals with these college campus and the anti-Semitism, pro-Hamas demonstrators that have been coming out. So with that, that's my parting shot for the day. We'll leave you. James, thanks for being a part today. We'll see you again. We got Friday's Finest coming up this week. Lots of stuff to talk about. Y'all take care. We'll see you soon.